Pikmin combat's been a staple of the gameplay loop since the first game, but it's never been, well, good. The basics of combat are simple. Pikmin slap something with their stems and its health goes down. You can also sometimes get items that either improve your own resistances, allow slightly new combat strategies, or give Pikmin a direct or indirect buff. With that in mind, it seems there's three main problems with combat right now. Starting with... So for balancing, it's pretty simple. It's pretty much impossible to scale combat encounters with the way the games are designed around strength in numbers. See, one Pikmin doing a set amount of damage at a set rate is normal. Add more Pikmin and it quickly scales to be a lot of damage very fast. And there's no real way to scale this. If you balance around a giant squad, then if a player only has a few Pikmin on them, the enemy turns into a damage sponge. So basically all enemies are balanced for the opposite, balancing for a small squad, which on its own is fine. Enemies should die quickly if you have a large amount of Pikmin. That's the trade-off of just having a large amount of Pikmin on you without them doing anything else. The problem is you need a way to force the player to not have like 70 to 100 Pikmin on them at all times, since it will completely cakewalk every single encounter. Purely on multitasking, Pikmin 1 and 3 sorta achieve this. Since a ton of Pikmin are going to be off doing different tasks, you'll usually have a smaller squad to deal with combat encounters, so the strength in numbers problem doesn't crop up as often. Though it can only go so far since it still is relatively possible to just have a large squad with you to pummel everything, especially with 3's more lenient juice-based time system. Pikmin 4 also tries to do this via multitasking, though it also has its own explicit overall Pikmin limits with the flawed system. Two varying results. Though Ochi kinda throws a wrench in that whole plan, with the game often not putting many barriers on the player, just riding him all the time, ensuring you have a large amount of Pikmin on standby. Caves also throw a wrench too, what with wild Pikmin and lessened time pressure. Speaking of caves, Pikmin 2's Pikmin economy is completely screwed. It's obvious 2's design was supposed to have your forces gradually dwindling until you reach the end of the cave. Boss treasures literally account for having low amounts of Pikmin, and it seems the bosses themselves are very much designed around smaller squads. However, the game simultaneously does shit that incentivizes players to play as safe and slow as possible, not knowing what they're gonna come across. Often this leads to straight up scouting for any danger. All this safe and slow playing obviously makes it harder to lose Pikmin, which brings out the strength and numbers problems even more. And of course, resetting, which is a whole can of worms on its own. I didn't even bring up purples, but that's more of... The games have had a bad habit of introducing some blatantly overpowered things, whether purple Pikmin, bitter spray, spicy wing Pikmin, ice Pikmin, Ochi Rush, and much more. But even beyond those, you usually have one move in your regular base arsenal that can often be a very powerful move in combat. I like to term this the move. In Pikmin 1 and 2, it's Swarm. Easily allows you to get a large group of Pikmin onto whatever you're swarming them onto. In Pikmin 3 Wii U, it's Charge. Lock onto an enemy, dismiss, and the Pikmin in your squad will all go directly to your target. In Pikmin 3 Deluxe, Charge gets a rework where it's independent of the camera and you can press X to send one type of Pikmin in a general direction, though you can use the also revamped Lock On to center them onto one target. This Charge returns with Pikmin 4 as an early game upgrade, along with the Rush ability that you can give to Ochi. That move basically combines 3 Wii U Charge and 3 Deluxe Charge into a single move. Swarm also returns, but it's borked, so who gives a fuck. Now these moves are obviously overpowered given what we've gone over with strength in numbers. This wouldn't be too much of a problem if there were loads of other strategies to experiment with, but combat doesn't really have those. Combat mechanics most of the time are relatively simple. Throwing, the move, and maybe an item here and there. It's not very in-depth, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, though it does mean it's only engaging in microbursts. Because of that, it's never really been, oh boy, here's a combat encounter! Usually the focus is on, shit, how the fuck do I optimize this route? Because when you really focus on the minutia of a combat encounter, there's not much to strategize with. You're essentially just following the same formula over and over and over again with little to no variation, even with totally different enemies. A major example of this has been boss fights, which for most of the series have ended up being nothing but enemies with more health and more waiting time. There just is not enough mechanical variation to make most of the bosses in this series feel substantially different from a typical enemy encounter, aside from maybe sometimes Pikmin 3's. 2's caves are another infamous example of this kind of scenario. Those shove you into boring gauntlets with not much going on besides a handful of treasures and a smattering of enemies to fight. Repeat this over and over again and you have a recipe for not fun. There's not really been a need to ever truly change up your combat strategy, and there aren't many avenues to do so. Besides items, the move, and throwing, there's rarely been anything more to use. And even chaining moves from your arsenal isn't very complex, since there's rarely a situation where you end up needing to use multiple moves in quick succession. Often it just feels like standing around and pressing A or later X works 80% of the time. The simplicity of the mechanics makes stuff like the move enough to often dominate a combat encounter and clear it in a matter of seconds. And it doesn't help that as the games have gone on, they've rarely made substantial additions to the combat mechanics. Bare minimum strafing has at least been softly encouraged more over time, especially now that all control schemes can have it, which does help to make things a bit more exciting. And funnily enough, Pikmin 3 and 4 have evolved combat a bit more than 1 and 2, which you wouldn't expect with the way people talk about the former games compared to the latter. 3 with the lock-on systems and dodge whistle, 4 with Ochi and a variety of items. But otherwise, you can essentially use the same strategies from Pikmin 1 to Pikmin 4. And when all the games have stuck to basically the exact same design while ignoring everything that has gotten more complex and far smoother, of course it's not gonna work, and arguably it never has. Now there is a common misconception that giving enemies more health will simply solve the problems, and that the reason the newer games are easier is because enemies have less health. Well, that simply isn't true. Digging into the game's files, we can see that most enemies have high HP values in Pikmin 1, 3, and 4. In fact, on average, 2 has the lowest health values. The true secret to why enemies go down faster in the newer games is because Pikmin latch on more. See, in Pikmin 1 and 2, when Pikmin are attacking something, assuming you're not just throwing them onto the object directly, there is a 20% chance they'll jump up to latch onto it. However, in 3 and 4, it's a 100% chance of latching in that scenario. In fact, here's what it would look like in Pikmin 2 if Pikmin latched at 100% rates. And remember the strength in numbers element. More Pikmin latched on attacking equals faster kill. This is part of why the move has always been so powerful. The Pikmin AI has also gotten smarter over time, which makes them more equipped to deal with enemies on a base level. They're better at attacking, better at latching, and have smoother movement. Now all of this would be relatively fine overall if enemies themselves were interesting to fight. And they are, right? Right? Many enemies are very boring combat-wise. Usually just one attack, bonus points if it's elemental, so you just need to use the right type of Pikmin, and the only defense is often just shaking off Pikmin, which is fine in small bursts, but really gets tiring after a while, especially with how many enemies use this basic pattern. Many enemies are also way too solitary, so they end up being an easy kill. To the game's credits, 3 and 4 have given some older enemies new ways to interact. Yellow Wollywogs have gained a grounded shake, Bulborbs and Bulbears had the eye stun in 3, Puffy Blowhogs are incredibly fucking annoying now, but in general, the way you fight different enemies is rarely any different from encounter to encounter. At their core, a majority of encounters boil down to getting behind an enemy so Pikmin don't get eaten, then pummeling the enemy until it dies. Over and over and over and over. Functionally, many enemies just feel like slightly evolved Goombas instead of actual creatures. Go up to one, they can attack you, get out of range, they stop. The enemy design of this series is also part of what makes strength in numbers so detrimental, despite it being a core tenet of the series as a whole. It wouldn't be as big of an issue if enemies were more reactive in general, since a fight's outcome wouldn't solely be determined by how many Pikmin you have, but rather how you fight the enemy. This could even allow enemies to have more health without it feeling unfair to smaller squads. But currently, many enemies are basically sitting ducks waiting to not fight the bum rush. This is also a spicy hot take, but I think enemy design, and frankly combat in general, has been hindered by having to take stick users into account. Because they can't design anything that places more pressure on the leaders, or anything more involved in aiming because then stick users can't do it. Luckily, with lock-on existing, this problem, hopefully, should be less relevant, and I pray the games actually realize this barrier has been essentially lifted. Like, imagine the possibilities. Imagine a Bulborb where the whole point is you fight it while it's chasing you, like in Occupational Hazards, or a Snagger secret where you gotta wind its neck into a tangle while running around it and throwing Pikmin on its head. Or running gun man-at legs. Seriously, man-at legs essentially being the same in 4 despite you literally having a damn mount is my 13th reason. Or a bull bear where it summons its children and you gotta quickly take out all its children while fighting the main bull bear itself. Or a more involved cropster. Like, imagine if enemies actually fucking moved. With the main problems facing combat outlined, what do I think should be done? Well, I'd personally say throw out the whole system and revamp it. But if we are going to keep the old style, I think a few alterations can work. For balancing, just force small squads. The most organic way to do this, in my opinion, is to focus on time management and multitasking. If you have actual time pressure, it becomes a lot harder to just hoard all your resources like large amounts of Pikmin. Explicit limits could possibly work, but 4 showed that could be more iffy in practice. Mechanics are tricky because while it's easy to just say to reduce latch rates or make Pikmin dumber, that interferes with a lot more of the game than just combat. It especially hinders actually trying to be efficient. And I don't think it's worth it to make the rest of the game feel worse just to try gas up combat. However, I think there are still things to do here. More movement options for the leader could be good. Pikmin 3 had a great idea with the dodge whistle, straight up giving you essentially a dodge roll. Unfortunately, being an optional upgrade made it easy to miss, and it was also screwed by its button mapping. It's on the D-pad, which is fine for the controller the game was designed around, that being the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, but anywhere else it gets shoved out of the way hard, and it's not even possible on single Joy-Con. An idea I had was really fleshing out Dodge Whistle, making it a more fully featured dodge. Some kind of sidestep for the player in Pikmin could also be a great addition. Obviously, turning down the overpoweredness of various mechanics is needed, which the games have tried to do, to varying degrees of success. For enemy and boss design enemies that are more engaging to fight. More attacks, more movement, and of course better placements in level design. And bosses need to be far more complex than just big enemy. The games could also learn from some examples of more complex enemies they already have, like one of my personal favorites, the Peckish Aristocrab. As it appears in Pikmin 3, they ruined it in Pikmin 4. Now this enemy is great for a multitude of reasons. It has actual counters that aren't just shaking. It uses its claw to block your throws, with its arm tracking where the Pikmin will land, and it can avoid charges. The blocking makes it so that you can't just pummel its body with Pikmin from the front, even with backwards throws. Attacking from the back is a viable strategy, but the Aristocrab will not only shake Pikmin in front of it, but use its secondary attack of bubbles to trap the Pikmin. Bubbles, while not harmful, are a major annoyance if Pikmin get caught in them, especially in the heat of the fight. The Aristocrab actually makes you move since it is constantly moving itself, and aiming properly actually becomes necessary rather than a borderline suggestion like with many other enemies. In particular, strafing is encouraged to get good hits, which is always a treat to see. And yes, for some of you in the audience, it does move fast enough that max pointer range won't really hit it standing still. Thank you! It also has good multi-type use, again, in Pikmin 3, since rock Pikmin are needed to break the claw normally without going out of your way to get a bomb rock, but the way they place them often means you're fighting the crab near water, essentially recommending you fight them with blues for a safer kill. All the while you're avoiding the swipes it makes with the claw that can capture Pikmin. And even after you destroy the claw, it still has the bubble attack for an extra layer of complexity, all while it continues to scuttle around. For an extra layer, I love how the Aristocrab in Tropical Wilds is near the slapstick crescent, so if you want to be risky and use a bomb rock you may have been saving for elsewhere in the level, you can time it just right so the bomb both blows up the Aristocrab and unearths part of the fruit. If only the series could have more enemies like this. With all that being said, combat as it stands is poorly balanced, mechanically hollow, and mainly used against static, boring creatures. It's always functioned better as a means to an end. Look at Pikmin 3 Mission Mode. Combat isn't really the focus, even in the modes explicitly about battle. The focus is on speed, and in that scenario, combat simplicity becomes less relevant since your brain is focused more on speed and efficiency than anything else. But when you try to structure an experience around combat, such as with many of Pikmin 2's caves, it becomes clear that combat is a very hollow system that cannot survive on its own for more than a few seconds. It really needs some changes to both make it more interesting in tandem with multitasking and on its own. But right now, it's one of the weakest elements in Pikmin's moment-to-moment gameplay. Kill the damn dog.